Walt Whitman considered his poetry a literal response to Emerson's call for a restoration of the original relation of each thing in nature and everyday life to universal spirit. Whitman incarnated the poet Emerson called for within a social order that Andrew Jackson had vitally reconfigured from a top-down structure with layers of descending authority to a non-hierarchical assemblage of equal individuals. Whitman's verse resembled Jackson's social order in that its lines and its phrases refused hierarchical subordination. But unlike Jackson, Whitman believed the poet must reject the utilitarian materialism that separated things in the United States from their participation in the spiritual life that circulated through all. Because Whitman thought of the United States as itself the greatest poem, he invented an unprecedented verbal form for celebrating its egalitarian procession of common things and persons. Whitman refused to subject his poetry to the constraints, poetic diction, rhyme, and rhythm, regulated by customs inherited from the European past, so as to give expression to the vital spiritual pulsations through which all things partook in the ongoing life of the whole. I believe a leaf of grass is no less than the journey work of the stars, and the pismire is equally perfect, and a grain of sand, and the egg of the wren, and the tree toad is a chef d'oeuvre for the highest, and the running blackberry would adorn the parlors of heaven, and the narrowest hinge in my hand puts to scorn all machinery, and the cow crunching with depressed head surpasses any statue, and a mouse is miracle enough to stagger sextillions of infidels, and I could come every afternoon of my life to look at the farmer's girl, boiling her iron tea kettle and baking shortcake. These lines disclose and express the absolute immanence of the self to an egalitarian series of impressions that express the supersensible ordering of even the most sensible things. Unlike Emerson, Whitman did not consider poetry a repository of rare sentiments experienced by exceptional persons who express them in privileged forms. Whitman believed that poetry awakened the universal spirit exteriorized as and immanent to the sensations, gestures, and attributes of all persons and all things. Whitman described his poetry as a liberating activity. It would break the chains by which things were held in the utilitarian order and the constraints by which individuals were held in the roles they were compelled to play in post-Jacksonian society. All things became equal in Whitman's lines because the poet released even the most infinitesimal and commonest of things. I believe a leaf of grass is no less than the journey work of the stars to the experience of itself as an emanation of universal, unanimous spirit. Now, many of Whitman's critics have dismissed his poetry as comparable to lists in an auctioneer's catalog. But as Jacques Rancière has recently noted, the things and persons listed in Whitman's verse differed from the merchandise in an auctioneer's catalog, and that his lines release the supplementary value that each being and each thing possesses. Because each thing in Whitman's verse is a microcosm of the whole, the value of equality that adheres in each and all things, subtracts them from the monetary estimations of the market, and resituates them in what Whitman described as the truly democratic vista, which was his other name for eternity. Your next assignment will ask you to complete a close reading of a Whitman catalog. As you go through its lines, consider this comparison to an auctioneer's catalog and try to differentiate the value of each: Whitman's lines, the auctioneer's series.